All right, Steve, what's happening, brother?
Nothing much. Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you for coming in, man. Flying all the way in from Texas. Sorry we couldn't bring the weather with us, but Steve, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to over the last couple of years?
Sure. I guess I'm a certified personal trainer. That's how I would first describe myself, but I have a background in public relations, and I wrote a book, so I'm also an author, Fitness Business 101, What the Certifications Don't Teach You. And basically what I do now, I also co-own a software company, which we'll talk about, which is Truly Fit, which is also the name of my podcast.
Okay, heck yeah.
But basically, a lot of my attention has been towards personal trainers and people in the fitness industry. What I try to do is help them out, start their business. A lot of personal trainers, much like myself, you get your first certification and then you don't know what to do next.
Go get some clients, buddy.
Yeah, they're like, okay, because it's a wild, wild west. They set you off on your own. So they teach you the body, they teach you kinesiology, they teach you how to do these things, but there's no jobs out there that are salary-esque jobs. It's still cream rises to the top. I have to go get my clients. Everything's commission-based. So what do you do next? What is the business move? We were just talking off camera how you might change the podcast name down the road. I wanted to change my book name after I released it because people heard the term Fitness Business 101 and thought they were going to open up a book and see like a bunch of businessy things that they can do to like instantly make more money, right? Some sort of weird marketing gimmick or scheme. It's not about that. Really, it's about the most important part of your business, as you know, is you. Being introspective about you and your skill sets and what you can bring to the business to make your business more successful. So for instance, a lot of personal trainers are very math and science minded.
I was just about to say, probably this field lends itself to people who are thinking about the body. They don't want to sign up for a bit. They would have went into business if they were into business.
That's right. So think about like a physical therapist, right?
Masseuse or anyone. In that
Someone like that. They understand the body, but maybe they don't put on a good show, what I call like an enter-trainer. Right? They don't put on a good show.
Enter-trainer.
Enter-trainer.
I like that.
And they're not able to like so for group fitness, you want somebody who's high energy, who knows people and who could read the room. And that's great. And for something like personal training, you don't always need that, but to understand who you are, your skill sets, maybe where they came from other careers, if you had a career beforehand, because a lot of people career transition into it, what skills can I take from that career that will blend with my new career in the fitness industry? And if you're not introspective about that, you're going to fail. So I spent a lot of time writing my book about that. I help personal trainers, and then I'm building a software that also sort of helps that out as well.
Wow, there's a lot there. So author, software company, fitness world, podcast host. How did this all begin, this fascination with fitness? And then you've already said a bunch of things that I want to come back to.
Like I mentioned earlier, most people in the fitness industry don't actually do it right away. They sort of fail into it or just decide they don't like what they're doing. So I was working in public relations in New York City, and then I was working at a hedge fund in New York City.
Okay.
Hated my job. And one day just had one of those Office Space moments where I said, I'm going to burn this place down. I gotta do something else. So I got a personal trainer certification, and I up and moved to Savannah, Georgia. Needed a fresh start from New York City, and then started my career. And most personal trainers, like myself, don't actually make it full-time right away, especially for the first few years. You just make it part-time. So there's just a little bit of money coming in. You have to find a way to make it. 85%, this is the number out there now, 85% of people who have a fitness certification never get to full-time. So they stay part-time or they get out of the industry completely.
I could see that, kind of like real estate almost, like you dip your toe in, you're like, maybe this is for me, but then it doesn't take off for you and you go, yeah, I don't know. I do train some people like on the side, but it's just like whatever. I do 2 or 3 a week, and that's a little bit of supplemental income, but I'm not really pushing it hard to become full-time.
That's exactly right. It's as if you've heard that statement before, because
I've heard many people who've dipped their toe into different activities. Fitness not necessarily being the first one that you think about when you think about people who are like trying to make some extra money. Most people I would imagine in the fitness world are doing it because they love fitness. And they think, I'm going to get to do something I love. I'm going to spend all day. I love spending time in the gym. I get to spend more time in the gym. But that's maybe not necessarily the reality of what it ends up being.
Well, too, there's also a very low barrier to entry. I would say real estate's the same way, right? You study for 3 months and then you can get your realtor license. Personal training's less than that. I mean, there's basically like weekend certifications that you can get. And the average general population person doesn't understand the difference. So if I told you today I have the certification from the International Fitness Society of America.
Sounds good.
I just made it up. I have no idea if they might exist. We could check it on a laptop. They might exist, but I don't know that, right? So nobody really knows the differences between these certifications. So You get these fly-by-night certs, and then it's kind of embarrassing if you don't have clients, right? So the first step is like, oh, I'm going to make business cards. I'm going to tell everyone online that I'm a personal trainer and,
Yep.
change my profile picture. And then crickets. Like nobody reaches out to you. You have to do the hard work to get into gyms, to get yourself noticed, to start learning and grow slowly. What I mean by that is people want to get more clients than they can handle, and then they fail because they can't help their clients because they're not successful, right? So people like you in your industry, you told me a little bit of your story beforehand, and me, the fact that we started slow was an advantage because you got to perfect the process. You got to learn in the journey, which is so important. Everyone wants to skip the journey now. You get to learn in the journey. I made all these mistakes, and then now I can sort of help one client or help two clients. And then once I've done that in the right way with passion and fervor and success, I can then start to expand my business instead of trying to get 15 clients right away and not being successful.
So I read that you said you did basically everything wrong for your first 3 years. So you're in Savannah, you just got this maybe first certification, and you're starting to kind of carve out into the game. How does that begin, and what do you quickly find out isn't working?
Made business cards, dropped them off at local grocery stores, put them on fence posts or wherever you can put them on, coffee shops. I don't know if kids still do that these days. I designed a website.
Yep, got to do that. Yep.
I don't think is not important. We can talk about that. I ultimately the online space is a lot of renting. So like Instagram, for instance, has banned me sometimes and not told me why and just sent me community guidelines. Right. So you can't do that with a website. At least with a website, I have full autonomy over my work. So I think it is good to have a website. But right away, nobody's looking at your website. Right. I have no authority score. No one's Googling, fitness and fitness in Savannah and my website coming up. So after the website, after the business cards, I dropped my resume off to every gym in town. But at that point, I just had a certification. I didn't have an experience. So nobody wants to work with you. So, what do you do next?
So how does it work with gyms, just real quickly? Let's say you got your cert and you want to work with a gym. What does that relationship look like? You're not employed by them, presumably.
It's a great question. So most of the time, because this isn't every gym, there's all different dynamics. Most of the time, it's a commission-based scenario in which when you're on the floor, when you're working with one of their clients and customers, you get a percentage of that. So maybe the personal training is, let's just keep the numbers even, $100 an hour, and they give you 50%. So you get $50 for that hour you train.
Ooh, but 50%, that's a lot.
That's assuming that's $100 an hour. It's usually not that high. So now if they're charging $60 an hour, now you're getting $30 for that hour. But mind you, that's only when you're training clients. So the other time, you're getting paid minimum wage sometimes to fold towels or to make phone calls and be sort of like a salesperson to get people into the gym. So that's a lot of times how the big box gyms work. Smaller gyms don't even have that because they don't have the level of clientele for you to be pitching. So they just say, hey, I can start you off with one person, maybe two, but ultimately, you got to go find clients and bring them in here.
They want you to bring people into their gym.
But they'll give you a higher percentage in exchange for that.
I gotcha. So you're out there kind of trying to find these clients. You're tacking business cards up. Do any clients come in?
Maybe one client came in, but there was no foot traffic in the few gyms I was in. And that's another thing we can talk about. But I purposefully put myself in multiple gyms. And it was for a different reason, but it worked out. So I did it because I wanted to learn all the different equipment, which was good, right? Because there's different equipment in different gyms. One gym was very senior laden. One gym was young kids doing Olympic lifting and sports training. One gym was just a standard gym. So I get to learn different equipment. But what really helped is to learn all the different systems that the gyms use. Not systems insofar as like the body and personal training. I mean like the actual physical systems. Like, are you using Vagaro, like scheduling systems on your computer? Like, are you
the back end business?
The back end business, right? Learning all those things to know, okay, what do I want to steal from them? What do I want to maybe throw away from this person? They don't do this right. They do this right, which helps you learn in the long run. So
interesting.
Being at those three gyms sort of really helped kind of form what I wanted to do, maybe quicker, and consolidated those thoughts than the average person would have just being at one gym and just seeing the way that one person does this.
Well, right. You see one gym, though they use QuickBooks. That's the only system I've ever seen used. It's like, hey, there are other things out there.
Yeah.
You can learn more. I feel like that's been true for us. We've just done business with so many clients and pitched so many clients and pitched so many brands and products over the last 10 years that I just feel like I have an intuitive understanding of what a good brand is going to look like. People go, look, what's your brand criteria? And I'm like, I just get on a call with them and I look at it and it's just like this ethereal, like I can feel it. This is going to work. And sometimes you can't even explain it, but you've just seen this 1,000 times over. You're like, I kind of have a good idea of what's going to work and what's not going to work.
Yeah, you got to trust your instincts if you've been successful before. I'm sure you don't even know, but you probably have subconscious measures that you are measuring, right? I'm sure there's some like red flags that are actually numerical and more, concrete that you look at. You're like, nah, I don't want to do business with these people. But eventually what I did is I started understanding that right now, time is on my side, meaning I have a lot of time because I don't have a lot of clients. Eventually, time is going to be, I need to put a dollar amount to that and I have to use my time wisely. But right now, I can give my time away. So what I was doing is free assessments. So I would do, hey, I'm going to do a free golf assessment. So you'd come in and I'd look at you and we'd go through some stretches first. I go, your hamstrings are really tight. That's going to impede your hinge. You're not going to get into the proper setup. Then we do a rotational thing. Then I'd check the flexibility of your chest and your lats. Well, we're not going to be able to rotate as much if your chest is too tight. We go through all these things. And then I would present these to the person and say, these are the things I think we could work on down the road. I'm not going to tell you how to fix them, but this is what would help. And that's how I started to get clients.
That's interesting. That's a wise thing. Where did that come from? Was that kind of just intuition that would be beneficial?
It was just intuition. It was sort of one of those last straws kind of deal. This was probably a year and a half into me just scraping by, just making rent, not doing anything properly. So I said, I have this time. Let me just book some time on Saturday and Sunday in the park and do free assessments.
Park? You're just kind of walking up to people?
I'm in the park.
Wow.
No, I'm set up with a table. I'm set up with a table and try to look as semi-professional as I can in a park and hope that people walk up to me and then do free assessments.
That's still a pretty cold approach, though.
Very cold. Yeah.
Interesting. What was your mentality like on the first day you set up? Were you just thinking like, well, let's just see what happens?
My first thought was I just have to get one person because it's a scene, right?
Yeah.
I have I'm doing movements. I have measuring tape. I have a yoga ball. I'm doing things that could be intriguing to other people who are walking past. So I just have to get someone to hop in and do this so that when the other people are walking around, they're more likely to now do it. Because if you're that guy sitting at the table and no one's looking at you and no one's coming up to you, it's sort of like, before you know it, you're sitting there for an hour and no one has come up to you. So.
Right. Is this 4D chess in your book? You tell people to do this and get 2 or 3 of your friends to be like, arms crossed. Oh, yeah, I'm in line. No, you can go ahead of me. Don't worry. Yeah, no, I got plenty of time. You go ahead of me. It'd probably work. It's like the line outside of the restaurant. You're like, I bet this place is good, man.
That's what people do with books. That's what they tell you to do with books. When you release a book on Amazon, they tell you, put the price as low as you can. 2 cents. Tell every single one of your friends and family members to buy that book, right? If they don't want to pay the 2 cents, you'll reimburse them. And then they can leave reviews on the book.
That is true, and it does help, but Amazon has cracked down a lot on that.
Probably doesn't work anymore.
It's the review manipulate. They actually are really strict on it now, and I know this obviously because we do business on Amazon. They really went hard on review manipulation because a bunch of, I don't want to point out a country, but there's a certain country that has a big contingency of sellers on Amazon. And what they would do was they would do all these crazy different review practices, black hat SEO. They would buy products and ship them to like people's houses, and people would just get this like at their house. Like they would legitimately be sending product to people's homes, but they'd be like, we didn't order this. They'd call Amazon. Amazon would be like, you don't have an order for this. And they're like, here's the order ID though. What's going on? And they'd be like, yeah, this is from a different seller. Like, this is weird. They sent this to your house. They kind of eventually figured it all out, and they really don't like it now. We had a girl. She's got a pretty big company, and she's got like a big following on social media. She's like, everyone go buy my product and leave me a review. Amazon just deleted all those reviews. They're like, no, this is review manipulation. And it wasn't. They paid full price. It was like all still fine and normal, but yeah, they've cracked down on it. But
well, hold on. It happens in our podcasting world too.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know how to get around that or circumvent that. So Apple has gotten around it. So Apple will delete, and they won't tell you why.
Reviews.
But I've seen podcasts that have like thousands of reviews and then they don't. So Apple will get rid of those. But what they can't get rid of is traffic, because traffic's not specific to any platform. So what happens is people will pay for these like traffic farms to just download their podcasts.
Interesting.
And it's not expensive.
It makes sense.
And it makes sense. And that's a way that people are growing. So you'll look at the podcast, you're like, oh, this is the number 12 podcast in the world. It's like, okay, well, 60% of their downloads are from another country that they're not in. So how is that possible?
I think artists were doing that also on Spotify. They were like paying people to listen to their music like in different countries, like the Philippines and things, because they get a small amount of plays, but it also like pushes them up in algorithms and things like that.
That's smart.
Yeah. It's a weird world, man. It's totally different now. So you start doing these assessments, you start actually getting some clients. Is it at that point that it stops scraping by and becomes like, oh, this is actually going to work? I'm not going to have to go back and work in my hedge fund in New York.
No, not even at that point. It was still maybe just, okay, now I can think about the next thing I can do, right? It's not just like thinking about paying the rent. Now I can find another pivot point at some point, but this is still not doing enough. So the next step was to really kind of narrow in, a la podcasting. Well, the experts will tell you the same thing, a niche.
I was going to ask if you had a niche prior to this.
Like I need a niche. No, at this point, I do not have a niche.
You're just anybody, big people, small people, little people, strong people, weak people.
You got to take on anyone you can. And in some respects, it's an advantage because you get to learn all of the different things and then pick the niche that you like. But what's also important is that you don't just pick a niche that you like. You pick a niche that is necessary and needs to be there. Does that make sense? So you're going into a space where, so give a fitness example, maybe in that particular town, there's a ton of CrossFitters and Olympic lifters and all these people who do whatever, but there's nobody who does Pilates or yoga. Well, okay, you're obviously going to probably be more successful starting a Pilates or yoga business than jumping into CrossFit if there's 6 CrossFit gyms in a small town already. So you have to kind of look to see what exactly is available and open. I got lucky that I learned Pilates on the Pilates Reformer, which for a man is not a normal thing. So to have the Pilates Reformer background when I started, I still had all the other general skills, but to have that in addition to really helped me out, sort of grow a different clientele and population, a senior population, which also helped me out because those are the people who have money.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never been on a reformer, but I heard that Joseph Pilates was not messing around when he built that.
Yeah, you can make the exercises extremely difficult or extremely easy. So it's one of those great things where the equipment is very versatile, but it's expensive. So you can charge more, you can upcharge, and the certification costs more. But then again, it's very niche and cool, and the older kind of people with money are willing to pay for those.
I was going to ask, is there an older population in Savannah, Georgia? Feels like there's an older, wealthier group of people in that town.
Yeah, I worked at a golf course. There were 6 golf courses on a more or less private island, and that was the community I worked in. So these are the people who
who
can pay for those sorts of things.
Yeah, is going to be on a golf course like that. Okay, so you kind of niche down into a little bit of Pilates and older people. At what point does your clientele almost become saturated where you go, oh shoot, like I can't take on that many more clients to scale this business? Because I think that's really one of the difficult things of any business where you are the primary operator and you can't export whatever you're doing. You hit this natural limit where it's like, I can't take on any more clients unless I want to work 80 hours a week. And then I'm like not really doing myself a favor any longer if I want to have some time to relax.
Yeah, probably year 5 of my business is when things really took off. Before that, it was still manageable, but year 5, it was like I had a waiting list longer than my clients. I'm like, what can I do here? I can't fit everyone in. And I tried to do my best to fit people in and say like, hey, I don't have the time to work with you on a day-to-day basis, but what I can do is fit you in for an hour, a half hour, build you a workout, and then send you to another trainer or something to that extent. But there was no really good way to handle this because small groups is not something that everyone wants to do. Now, that is the way to go about it, ultimately, and I did do some of that, but you can't force everyone into that. But that is the way I handled it first, to make more money and start to get that waiting list smaller, to make that waiting list smaller. So let's go ahead and say I had 6 people who are all between the ages of 60 and 70. They were all women, and they all just wanted general health and wellness, and they all were willing to work out in the morning. Well, I'm going to put you together. And instead of charging you $100 an hour, I'm going to charge you each $40 an hour. Okay, but there's more of you, so I'm making more money for that hour. That's ultimately what you try to do, but you still need a personal approach to it because they are paying a decent amount of money, and it is not. I don't consider this a group fitness class. I consider this still one-on-one personal training.
But would everyone do basically a similar workout, or?
Everyone would do a similar workout except for the weight that they're doing.
Yeah.
But then you start to run timed classes rather than repetitions, because you're going to finish an exercise of 8 repetitions at a different time than someone else is. But if I say, hey, work for 45 seconds, pick your appropriate weight, then everyone can work. And what it does is it starts to build this camaraderie in which everyone is expecting the other person to be there at the group. So you don't even need to get people to come, because, Nancy is making sure that Sally comes to class, or else, she's going to get shit next time she comes.
Well, I think it's one of the beautiful things about CrossFit that they did so well is they built a community around, hey, we're going to do this class every day at 5:00. So then you make friends. Now your friends are coming and we're all working together, kind of challenging each other, challenging ourselves, which that does not happen in a commercial gym where you walk in 24/7 whenever you want. You maybe have 1 or 2 people that you all wave to. Maybe you have a gym partner, but I would say most people just walk in, work out whenever they want, and leave.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think most people nowadays too, with social media and just so much electronic and stimuli, people go to the gym to decompress, and they don't want to talk to anybody. They find it rude. You tap me on the shoulder. What are you doing? This is my alone time. Even yoga, when I go to yoga classes, everyone has their own spot. Everyone's just looking at the instructor. Don't talk to me. Don't come close to me. Don't sweat on me. I'm going to go in. I'm going to go out. Don't say a word to anybody. Whereas in CrossFit, came along at that right time where they said, you know what? No, we're going to do this more like a sport. We're going to make sure there's a team camaraderie aspect involved in this. And I do think it was smart. It obviously worked. I mean, they're doing well.
Well, yeah, not only that, but it's a scheduling benefit too, right? You get people in and out of the gym in 1 hour so that you never have a time where it's like, hey, there's 100 people in our gym. We just literally cannot manage this many people at this hour. Sometimes commercial gyms run into that. There was a gym that I used to go to close to me, and if you wanted to go in there 7:00, it's just absolutely slammed. This is not even feasible that I can really work out in here.
Yeah. I mean, that's most places. They charge you a very, very low fee, but you're competing with the high and low times of gyms. If you're the average person who works 9 to 5, well, you're going to go to the gym at 5:30 or 6:00. Well, guess what? 80% of that gym is also going to that gym at 6:00. So good luck getting any equipment.
Yeah. I think you're hitting on a really important thing about scaling a business, right? So you start where it's just you and you don't have any clients, and you have all day to work with anybody you want or do any marketing activity endeavor that you want. And then you get to a point where it's okay, my day's actually getting kind of busy. I kind of am full with clients. You get to this next step here where you go, I'm too busy to take on all of these clients. I would call this the people to productivity ratio. How productive can your business be based on the amount of people that you have? Then what comes next in that scalability with a business like yours? Or maybe any business, as you're starting to think out, okay, you do group classes. How do you go to the next level then?
Virtual now. I mean, 20 years ago, that really wasn't possible, but now it's virtual.
Bigger classes, or you create a certification of your own.
I mean, that would be maybe 2 or 3 steps down. First, it's just you create something that is evergreen that you can hand out to people. So something like, hey, the 5 best stretches for golfers. And then you make videos on that, and you sell those. Right now, you can do that online, and you can spread that out far and wide so that you're making money in the fitness space while you're training. So you don't maybe have to train as much because you're also selling those things online. So kind of easy evergreen things that you can create that are always there for clients. That's the easier way to go right away as a personal trainer. I think going to that next step. I do think there are probably other iterations of that as you continue to grow to get even bigger, like starting a software company, which I'm doing. But I do think that's not really the mindset of a personal trainer.
What about opening an actual gym?
No, I think it's a mistake for for most people. Yeah, there's just, it's so hard to be successful opening up a gym.
Really? Why do you say that?
There's so many big box gyms that are willing to take a hit and take losses because they can, because they just have investor after investor pumping money into them, like the Planet Fitnesses of the world, that you're going to have to run your gym specifically around personal training. Because if you think you can just get memberships to pay, it's not going to work. I mean, they're charging $10 a head.
Oh yeah.
Right. You're going to rent out, I don't know, I'm just making up 4,000 square feet of space or something, right? And you're going to charge $10 a head between all the equipment that you have to pay for, all the employees, all the insurance, everything else. You're not going to net a lot of money. Most gym owners I know are just skirting by, small gym owners, and where they get their money and when they are successful, it's because they have a lot of personal trainers in there and they're taking a percentage of their personal trainers. Even if I take 30% and I give you 70%, but the impetus is behind you and the incentive is you as the personal trainer to get as many clients as you can. So if you have a bunch of personal trainers racking in whatever, $120,000 a year, and you're taking 30% of that in addition to maybe some other member type things, then you could be successful. But just your average gym who doesn't do a lot of personal training, who's just charging memberships, is not going to be successful.
Yeah, when you start that gym, first you have that cost of equipment, which could easily be 50 grand. Then you're going to have that ongoing monthly overhead of whatever, $2,000 to $3,000 in rent, plus keeping your lights on. And if you're 24/7, your lights are always on, literally. Then you have staffing time. Then you're trying to cover that, cover the loan associated with the gym equipment, and then come out ahead. You're saying that you just don't see the economics work that often.
If you own 10 of them, sure, right? So a lot of these things, it's like, do you want an Airbnb? Good luck. If you want 10 Airbnbs, okay, and then we have a business. Because even if one of them's not doing that, okay, maybe some of the other ones are, right? But you can't just own one small gym. It's just not going to do it unless it's your passion, right? Unless you're skirting by and you're willing to make $50, $60, $70, $80,000 a year, and that's your passion. But if you're going to actually at that point, you're not scaling, right? You could have just been a personal trainer, not had all that pressure to own a gym and be the owner and get all this stuff done, and still been making that money. So yeah, I don't think owning a gym now in 2024 is the best way to go about it, unless, again, it's a niche specialty gym. Maybe you do Pilates reformer and you have special things, or maybe you're in a more expensive area like we just talked about. You do golf personal training, you're charging $150 a session, and it's combined with something else. But your average gym, no, I think it's too difficult.
Unless you can get to multiple locations, build a brand, and then you're known in your general area for your brand.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, Planet Fitness is in the red. I mean, they trade on the NASDAQ, but sort of a lot of businesses that ended up failing and going bankrupt, right? So from the outside, it's sort of like a conversation I have a lot with health and vanity. People can look great on the outside. That doesn't mean they're great on the inside. Businesses could look great. There's a guy driving a Lamborghini down the street. You think all is well, but he's $200,000 in debt, and he doesn't live in a very nice house. So I think a lot of it's just a facade in the fitness industry. It's very difficult to run gyms unless, again, you have a ton of locations and you're doing it properly and you're charging just the right amount. I think Planet Fitness charges way too little. They're not. They just have investors who can continue to come back in and back them and back them and back them. And they're basically the only game in town sometimes, right? If you're in the middle of nowhere, if you're in Norman, Oklahoma, that's where you're going, because there's no one else starting gyms, because there's just too much capital behind having to start a gym. So it's much easier for people to pay $10 and just go to Planet Fitness.
Interesting. Okay, so we're probably not going to get into the gym business. And also, if you're an individual and you want to have like a lot of autonomy in your life, you're tying yourself to a physical location, and you're tying yourself to a ton of extremely heavy equipment that's really, really difficult to move. So you're basically just like, all this stuff is going to stay here. Like, I cannot get rid of this. Your best bet would be eventually you can sell that gym to someone else who wants to operate it. But to your point, we had a business broker in here, and I was like, what about unprofitable businesses? How are those to sell? He's like, they're hard. They're hard to sell.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to basically build a profitable business, or else you're always going to be tied to that location. You're going to be that person who has to come in and man the gym, sweep the floors, do all that stuff. If you want to be someone like you, who I know can do a lot of different things and be on the go, it's probably a lot easier to be a little more flexible with your business and not tie yourself down to one physical location.
Yeah, and let me maybe just clear up gym. A gym is such a generalized word, right? What you may think of a gym is not what I may think of a gym, what someone else may think of a gym. If you have some sort of small niche business, I know there's a lot of guys now who specialize in basketball training, and they just have a little bit of equipment, right? They have dumbbells, they have boxes, they have bands, they get a small space, maybe they put up a hoop. It's a great business model, right? You have a specialty, you're probably overcharging for that specialty, you don't need a lot of equipment. If we're considering that a gym, that's a great business model. But the traditional gyms where you're like, oh, I'm going to go into a Gold's-esque gym. I'm going to walk in, or like it looks like a high school like lifting room. I'm going to go in, there's going to be a bunch of equipment. I'm going to be a small mom and pop thing and charge people to come in. That's just not the way it goes anymore.
Interesting. Okay, so how do you eventually get to podcast software, that next step in your development process?
Yeah. So my wife is a pediatrician, but she's a very specific pediatrician. She's a sports medicine pediatric doctor.
You got a lot of people in your circle that are into this. I saw that your sister's also a dietitian. Is that
My
right?
sister's a registered dietitian, yeah,
Yeah.
licensed dietitian. So my wife's job is odd, and she started out in just general pediatrics, and she wanted to really hone in on her specialty. She said, "Why did I go to this, extra year of training if I can't use this specialty?" So we've moved around a lot, and because we've been moving around a lot from Savannah to Oklahoma City to now Austin, Texas, um, it was I had to force myself to find a better model, and also COVID happened sort of at the same time. I
Mm.
was thinking like, what can I do? What's the next iteration of this business model? What do I need? What do other people in the fitness industry need? And as we talked about, clients are always the thing that people don't have, right? Whether you're starting your business or whether you're midway through, we always need clients. So I met with someone, became my business partner, who's a kind of software engineer, and we are designing still a platform. It's not totally out yet. We have people working like in beta in the background, but think of ClassPass, if you've ever used that, where a bunch of gyms are on there, and there's regular people like you and I, and we're looking to sign up for something. But instead, we have personal trainers specifically, so not gyms, individual personal trainers, and then the general population. So maybe Bob, who's general population, says, I want a personal trainer who can help me, again, sticking with golf fitness. And he can type in some keywords on our site, and it'll pull all the personal trainers up on our site that have that particular certification. He can click on them, and it has like a little bio page, like it would like your Facebook page or something, right? It tells you tells you what exactly he does. If he has a virtual schedule, you can book him for your virtual schedule. If he is live, where is he? Where does he, have his business out of? Maybe you're both in Miami, so you can work with him. And the site itself, you pay the site first. So we're sort of the intermediary.
Who's you, the trainer?
So Truly Fit, the business. So not the trainer. So the general population person would pay us,
Okay.
and then we would pay the trainer.
Okay.
So we take a small percentage.
Would you
of
pay
it.
like a retainer or just like, hey, I did my session, here's the money?
That's correct. Yeah, you did your session. Here's the money. But what we do is you actually buy tokens and coins because it's just easier that way. People are kind of maybe willing to also spend more money if they're like, oh, I'm spending one token. If one token's $30, you're more likely to spend tokens than dollars.
I gotcha. Interesting.
Yeah.
I guess my question, because I don't specifically know, is there something similar out there for the fitness world to pair people together? There's definitely like Thumbtack. That's the first one that I thought of, where it's like, hey, you find handymen. Is there something similar out there?
Not for fitness personal trainers specifically, right? So yeah, Thumbtack does a lot of different careers.
Yeah.
So they don't specialize in fitness, not helping you. Like we have workout builders attached to the site. So if you're a personal trainer, you go on, you get a free workout builder. You can just design the workouts for your clients on there and send it to them. So we have more features than just like a client retainer would, if that makes sense. But yeah, ClassPass does that for gyms. They don't do it for individual personal trainers.
Okay. And presumably that's going to help people, one, simplify their workflow, but two, get clients. That would be the big push for them, is like, hey, you're going to be connected with people.
Yeah, and not cost them anything outside of a small percentage of whatever they charge, right? Because at least to start, the business model is you don't have to pay to be on as a professional. You just sign up.
Interesting. Okay, I like that. Now, the difficult part, obviously, is getting user adoption. How would you think about getting user adoption onto your software?
Well, number one, because we're free, we're hoping that people sign on because there's no negative to it. Like, why not, right? I'm not spending any money. Number two, I have some connections with some certifications. So, if you're a certification and you have, 3,000 people to 80,000 people, depending upon your certification, underneath your belt, you might be able to pitch it to your people. Hey, if you sign on, we'll give you this percentage off of your certification, right? I would reach out to the certification companies and incentivize them to incentivize their people to use Truly Fit.
What about the people seeking a trainer? How would you incentivize them to download the application as opposed to, because I actually went through this.
Yeah.
You probably didn't see him, but my swim coach was working out. I found him. I don't even know what software site I found him from, but I was like swimming coaches, Columbus, Ohio, and somehow I stumbled across him and connected with him, and then he helped me train for what eventually became a 5K swim. But how would you get the user to go, oh, I need to sign up for this application? that would be probably, I think, the most difficult part.
Yeah, I'd say on my business partner side, SEO, right? Search engine optimization would be a big push there. On my side, it is, well, the podcast. It's part of that, right? So I'm trying to gain a know, like, and trust factor from the podcast, from my book, from my name to bring people on to the site as well to say, hey, this is what we're passionate about. We want to help the general public get in better shape, and we want to help personal trainers be better at their job. So we're bringing everyone together.
Okay, so while we're on the topic of applications, because everyone out there listening has an app idea, what's the reality of actually building an application and bringing it to the market? How difficult is it? How much cost is there associated with it? What's it like getting onto the App Store, knowing that you still have some hurdles ahead of you still?
It's really difficult. I'm sure there's easy ways to go about it that will backfire in the long run, like just reaching out to somebody from a different country and be like, hey, this is what I want to build. But when you go through it the right way, and you have a computer engineer building everything out, yeah, it's difficult. And then we're also desktop, so we have to make sure that fuses with everything perfectly. And
a lot of people don't think about that's basically two different builds, like desktop and mobile.
Yeah, not only is it two different builds. So I didn't even say this, but the original desktop software was for a different company. I can't say who that company was, but they're a pretty famous, I can tell you off air, a pretty famous, let's just call them a martial arts type fitness studio. Okay.
Interesting.
And during COVID, they backed out because they lost a lot of money because people couldn't show up to the studios to do the workouts, especially because they were in very just like liberal cities who had closed down completely. So they couldn't. And the software then had to be reworked into what we wanted it to be, if that makes sense, right? So my business partner already sort of had this software. We had an idea, and he says, well, I have this software that really already almost fuses with this. We just have to make some tweaks. We don't have to build it from the ground up because he had the rights to that software at that time.
Is that how you get involved? You kind of got
That's
pushed
how
in?
I got, because he knew my background from there, and I got pulled in. Hey, what do you think about this? I know we briefly talked about this in the past about doing this. Now I think we have the perfect opportunity. We can kind of rework the software and do this. In addition to that, we have hundreds of thousands of emails that we have access to because that was part of the deal with this particular company who backed out. They lost those emails that they had.
Well, that's a good starting point.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the cost of building out an app? Because my company is building out a software for an inventory management. Similar but different, I'm sure. But I know what costs I have. So maybe just tell me what the reality is and cost associated with building an app. Because a lot of people I talk to, they're like, I want to build an app. And I'm like, how much money do you have? They're like, $500. I'm like, not going to get you on a call with an app developer.
Are you including all the money to pay the developers to work on it on a daily basis?
Yeah.
I mean, to this point, we're definitely like $250,000 in.
Yeah, that's I think the reality of it. Our software is starting at $194,000, and they're like, that's your starting version. There's going to be a bunch of features that you want that will not come on day one. And I know probably a bunch of people listening are like, that's crazy. You guys are stupid. There's somebody out there. I know a buddy who will build it for $4,000. It's like, okay, well, yeah, we want this to be like enterprise level, essentially. Like we want to run our business that pushes $50 million a year in sales through it. Like we don't want this to be like a hack job, essentially. And for you to get serious about this as a legitimate business that could do tens, hundreds of millions of dollars of transactions through it, you don't want it to be like shoddy. You get one launch attempt, you want it to be pretty good when it launches and then iterate from there.
That's a great point. And I like to use the jargon of enterprise because yes, this is there's enterprise features for us too. This isn't just the regular person. Big gyms can use this. There's different ways that this can be used. So yeah, it has to be built out manually, for lack of a better term, right? You can't just be some throw together thing that somebody has done in the past and is charging you a tenth of the price for. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, I wish we were closer to being able to just like get on ChatGPT and be like, code me an app that I can do workout bookings with. But I still think we're pretty far away from that. Maybe in 5 to 10 years, who knows? And I don't know what the world will look like when everyone can build an app. I'm not sure if it'll be a better place or worse place. Okay, well, then I have some other questions. Tell me about the podcast. What's the reasoning behind it, and how did it develop, and what are you attempting to accomplish?
Yeah, it's partly a passion project, kind of married with the know, like, and trust factor for Truly Fit. You can consider it a net. We want to capture a lot of eyeballs so that when we do launch, we have both the trust from the public and the trust from other fitness professionals who know that I'm serious about my business and I want to help them. And that's what I'm dedicated to doing. I wrote a book. It took, weeks and months of my time to write a book, not because I was doing this for money, but because I was actually trying to help personal trainers. So we interview experts in fitness and health of all sorts. And business.
Yeah.
So if you are, I have tax specialists on who work specifically with people in business. I have on wealth management people who work with people who own gyms. And then I have on, physicians who are obesity medicine specialists talking about innovative procedures they're doing. And I have on regular personal trainers just talking about their day-to-day and whatever, Ozempic experts, you name it. We talk about it. It's a little bit of everything. And now what they'll tell you in the podcast world, that's not a good thing. So they said, you can't cover all these things. You should be niche. You should say like, hey, we're only going to cover the third scene in the second Star Wars movie every day. It's like, well, I'm just not interested in that. And if I'm not interested, then it's not authentic.
That's how I am, man. I think that a niche is good. You got me saying niche and niche both back to back. I think it's a good thing. I totally understand the marketing logic. You have a consumer that you're attempting to attract, but when you talk about scale business, right? Like if you're analyzing Star Wars, it's like, okay, that's a pretty small group of people that want to listen to that podcast. And I get it. You're going to start a lot faster, but then where do you go from there? Like you're not going to have 10 million listens on a Star Wars podcast. It's just not that reasonable. Not that many people want to listen to something about Star Wars or whatever, small topic. Whereas I think, and this is my personal opinion, but I think it's fleshed out by the charts, the biggest podcasts in the world, Joe Rogan's, your Lex Friedman's, Chris Williamson's, they don't only talk to a person that is one specific thing. And that's partially why I talked about potentially changing the name of this podcast, TBD, because people think downloading dollars, they're only about business. And like, I'm not really a business person. I don't know if I can help you guys talk about your topic. And I'm like, no. We'll talk to anybody who has an interesting story. So that's, I think, why I would be interested in changing the name of our podcast if we did, is to reassure people this is not just a business podcast. Yes, I'm really interested in business. Yes, I believe people can make their life a lot better if they become better at business, as I'm sure you would attribute also. But that's not the only thing that I'm interested in.
Sure. Yeah. And also from like a zoom out macro perspective, the podcast takes a lot of energy and there's more you put into it than comes out of it, especially at first, but maybe forever, right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to continue down this road and, credit to you and me and people who are professional about this, right? Some people think, oh, you're a podcaster. What do? You just flip open a camera and start, drinking with your buddies and talking? Like, no, I consider myself and you a professional interviewer. I do my due diligence on the person, right? You have the hospitality to bring me out here. So you're serious about this, but ultimately, if you're not intrigued, if you're not doing the work, if you're not interested in your guest, if you're not interested in talking about these things, it comes through. People notice it. They're like, I don't want to listen to this. They're just going through the motions, right? So unless you're revved up to learn or talk to somebody or just, pick someone's brain and pass that on to other people, it's never going to be good.
I can interview 1,000 Amazon sellers and I'd be like, I pretty much know everything you're going to say right now. Like, I don't want to talk to people who are just like me. It's nice to have commonalities, but I don't want to hear the same story over and over again.
I couldn't agree more. I barely interview fitness professionals on my podcast. They're always adjacent, right? They're not just personal trainers. They're physicians. They're people who maybe have a specialty in personal training that I'm not that familiar with, right? Maybe a weird yoga that I've never done before. It's not just what I do because I have those answers already. And if I'm not intrigued and I'm not answering and I'm just throwing softballs up for this person, it's like, well, I could have just gave this podcast myself.
Yeah. Some of my favorite podcasts we've done have been with people that I thought their industry was going to be so boring. I say this all the time, but we had a guy on who was in waste management. I'm like, that's going to be a weird podcast. Amazing guy, super charismatic. He won a national championship with Joe Paterno at Penn State. He's like, I had a boss that murdered someone. We're like, whoa, this is awesome. But he just loved it. He loved the waste management industry. And you could hear that passion in his voice. He's like, we have a do not compete. It's 1 year, but once it's done, we're going to be back out there, Alex. We're going to be back out there starting another one. And I was like, heck yeah, brother. Keep it going. So what have you learned during the podcast? What things do you feel like you've picked up?
Well, you become a better, more comfortable speaker, right? I open up the fridge now, the lights come on, and I start talking because it's just it's normal. Yeah, you have to get comfortable with it on the podcast. I realize that some people are not, so I have to really remember that. Like, people will come on my podcast with credentials that you couldn't believe, right?
I've had those folks on that you're like, you're super smart. You're going to be easy to talk to, and they don't want to talk.
They don't, and they're just, they don't have that thing. Like I just talked about being introspective with personal trainers. You have two different kinds. You have a direct personal trainer who knows the body well. They're anatomical sleuths. They can figure things out. And then you have the personal trainer who's a little bit more demonstrative, who can hold a conversation, is the intra trainer. Well, you have that in a lot of other positions too in life. And when you have the super smart people, I graduated from Stanford and I have the PhD from University of Chicago and I work in this and that, and they're very science brain type people. They're not always as comfortable on the mic, right? We don't have it all. I always explain life as like a video game. Those old school video games where we had characters, so they'd be like, oh, magic 0 to 100 and stamina 0 to 100 and power 0 to 100. Like, you never had a guy who had it all, right? It's like, oh, this guy has 80 in magic, but he's like 40 in stamina and 40 in strength, right? Like, ultimately, it always evens out, but you have to remember that there's a reason they got to where they were, because they do know what they're talking about. They just might not be as as comfortable conveying that information.
Yeah, I think that ability to communicate your information effectively is one of the most important skills, especially if you fancy yourself to be like intellectual or a scientist or a person that's in kind of that field. I feel like they have really struggled to communicate their information to the public. So, and then I was going to ask you about this because I know certain trainers get really mad at other people that are on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, and they're giving out fitness information. They're like, this is bad information. This is bogus. This is bullshit. And it's like, well, people are listening to them for a reason. Maybe instead of being upset, you could totally be upset, but take note, like, someone's listening to this for a reason because they're a good communicator. There's that. And then it also takes me to a question that you had is, should your trainer be in shape? So maybe tackle both of those for me. Should your trainer be in shape? And what do you make out of the social media sphere that has come to dominate fitness?
Yeah, when I talk about the social media sphere, it's difficult because I have to remind myself that what I see isn't what you see, right?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't what John sees, isn't what Sally sees. We all are, it's
all got our custom algorithm.
Yeah, it's cultivated to us specifically and curated to us. So I think that it's difficult because, I see too much of that. So it drives me crazy, but I don't know if it's everywhere on everyone's feed. So I don't want to, embellish and go over the top. But yes, it's a problem. And it's a problem from both sides. It's a problem that people think they can be gatekeepers of the community. Oh, I have this fly-by-night certification, so you can't tell anyone else what to do. Only I can. No, that's not how it works. Anyone can tell anyone. Good information should beat out bad information. This is how it should go. But the reason why it's becoming a problem in the other end of the spectrum is because everyone is taking a team and a side, and it's become really tribal. And then the rebound effect from becoming tribal, at least in my industry, is that people just say you could do whatever it is you want, and people have become very undisciplined. So let me give you an example. People will say you can only eat high protein diets and maybe lean meats or something, right? So, and then somebody finds a study, because there's always a study, right?
Oh, there's so many studies.
You can find a study
to tell you
anything you want. So there's some study that says, well, no, that's not the case. You actually want to eat more fatty meats. And then someone says, well, actually, you don't want to eat meats at all. Here's why you want to be vegan, and here's why you want to do this. So the younger generation in the fitness and especially the nutrition world has now come out and said, you guys have put so many rules on us. It's like, imagine your parents, my parents had clutter everywhere. They had antiques everywhere. So I am modern. And I'm a minimalist, right? I want everything white and black, and don't put anything in my house I don't need to use. And that's what's happening with the younger generation. They're saying they put so many rules and restrictions and want to tell us what we can and can't do. You could eat anything. You could be healthy at any size. Don't worry about counting your calories. Don't worry about what kind of workout you do. Just go on a walk. Do cozy cardio. Just walk for 20 minutes on a treadmill while you're watching Sex and the City. It's like, well, now we've gone too far. And that's what always happens, right? The pendulum swings to be so specific, and now it's so general.
Yeah, you said something there that my graphic designer actually he said, and I was like, wow, you just said something really insightful. He's like, whatever idea you have, you can just search it on the internet and you'll find something that confirms it. So he's like, it's almost just pointless to even do that or begin that process. I was like, that's really thoughtful. And to your point, yeah, if you think carbs are bad, it's like, are carbs bad? You're gonna find 1,000 articles that tell you carbs are bad. Like, are carbs good? You're going to find 1,000 more articles that tell you carbs are good. It's kind of the classic, you have a court case, two expert witnesses. They're both experts. They both come in, but they tell you the exact opposite thing is true from each other. You can find that in any field.
I think you're giving people too much credit. That would actually mean that they're Googling to get information. They're not. They're just finding it on Instagram and TikTok. And all they have to do is like one video that agrees with them. And now they're going to start seeing that over and over and over. So they're not even doing the hard work of maybe coming across an article that they disagree with.
Well, yeah. And you talked about everyone's feed is different. And I don't really use social media. Steve, my editor, gets mad at me because he's like, we got to try to promote the podcast more. I'm like, I get you. But my feed doesn't even feed me things that I want. So I follow one person on Instagram. But if I ever click into the search, it's just stuff. And I'm like, I don't want this. It thinks that I want this just because at one point I clicked a picture, a video of something. And I'm like, I literally want the opposite of this. Like, I want to retrain Instagram. So sometimes, it's not even relating to your deep thoughts and desires of what you want. It's more like that hedonistic, like, oh, I want to see like people shirtless. I want to see like jacked dudes and fit girls. And it's like, I know I don't want to see that in my feed or else I would follow it. But Instagram, they're appealing to the bottom of your brainstem.
Well, Florida just put a ban on it, actually. Went through yesterday or today. So they put a ban on, it'll be fought, but it's not content related. It's 3 features. Number 1 is the continuous scrolling feature, because they prove that if you can just continuously scroll and it doesn't end, that you're more likely to do that. 2 is the automatic play video. So it used to be, maybe so far gone now that we forget, but you actually had to click play to see videos. Not the case anymore. Now you can't even turn the volume off. You could have the volume all the way down your phone, you scroll to the video, it plays. And the third one I forget, but there's another feature, some algorithmic feature that they're using, and Florida has now banned all 3 of those features. And it's not towards any particular platform. They're saying if your platform, whether you're brand new, whether you're TikTok, whether you're whoever, if your platform does this, you're going to have another iteration. You're going to have a
Florida version,
a 2.0, basically, for kids under the age of 14.
I can't imagine that would work at all with TikTok. I don't know how you would have to click a video to make it play on TikTok. Or even Instagram, because I think Instagram, everything just plays as soon as you scroll through it, right? I'm not on TikTok or Instagram, but yeah, that'll probably get fought. Big tech's got a lot of power. They can probably push back. You think like a state has power? They're like, Google's like, hold on a second, watch this. Okay. So what about your trainer? Should your trainer be in shape? Should your trainer be fit?
At some point in their journey, they should be. Yeah. Should you have sold something on Amazon at some point?
I don't think we were ever the worst seller in the world.
Yeah, but just having some experience on what you do, right, I think is important. So as a trainer, I'm trying to get people healthy, not always in shape, healthy. Okay. For me, personally, everyone has different ways they go about it, right? You might have a trainer whose goal is for somebody to, just have big biceps, and they don't really care about their overall health and wellness. I consider myself like a health advisor, like a financial advisor, right? I'm worried about your long-term health and wellness, not just your short-term health and wellness. So if you have short-term goals that I think interact or supersede those long-term goals, I'm going to talk you out of them and say, you told me, Alex, that you wanted X, Y, and Z long-term, so we're not going to do this exercise, or your new goal of squatting this amount, too high of a risk of you getting injured. I don't want to go down this road with you, right? So, but anyway, yes, if your trainer is in good shape, or at some point, their experience, which matters, right? Our experiences in our lives where we learn things matter. They're going to be able to pass more on to you. Now, you might have a trainer who is 60 years old. Well, that trainer's 60 years old, and maybe it's a female, and they had 4 kids and they have 3 grandkids, and they have a knee issue. Yeah, maybe they're not going to be in great shape anymore. That doesn't mean they don't come with the knowledge and the wisdom and what I call crystallized knowledge that's accrued over time, all the different exercises to use, what to stay away from. But they might not look in shape at this point, but they were at some point, right? If you were never in shape, if you're 22 and you're in very bad shape and you got your first certification and you think you're ready to train people, you're missing the mental component and the physiological component of where you got there. All the great coaches have been there. They're usually not the best, by the way, though, too, right? So when you look at great coaches like a Bill Belichick or something, they played on some level, but they were never the best because it helped them to not be genetically superior, because they knew they had to. Steve Kerr, for example, right? He had to know how to work. He had to know how to be able to be a great 3-point shooter and a great foul shooter and just do the right things on defense because he wasn't genetically gifted. So I think that's important too. Even trainers who have been there, done that, weren't born physical freaks, but have managed to get into shape so they can teach other people how to do it.
I guess I would push back a little and say I think becoming an NBA player is a lot more difficult than getting in generally good shape as a trainer. I get you a 60-year-old woman who's got knee issues and has kids. Like maybe it's a little harder for her to have like what you'd consider like an impressive physique. But also our bar for an impressive physique has fallen so low. Like if you're like 12% body fat as a man now, it's like, wow, you're really lean. Like, you guys don't understand what lean is, because 12% is not really that lean. So yeah, that would be my case is like, if you're that 22-year-old, getting into decent shape is probably not that difficult compared to getting to the NBA. Maybe.
Yeah, well, but there is a time component to this. So this is what I'll say. If you're in amazing shape, like you look like you can go on stage, you're going to be putting in a lot of time to do that, right? Hours and hours. You're going to have to eat a ton of food. You're going to have to I have friends who woke up at 3 a.m. They set their timer just to down an extra 40 grams of protein because they couldn't sleep through the night without get enough calories in, right? To get enough protein in to look a certain way. They're training twice a day. Well, when do you fit your clients in? Because experience matters too. So if you're only focused on your body and how you look, when are you actually learning about other people? When are you actually spending the time to work on other people? So I think that's also an important part of it too. As anybody in the health industry, it's you can't just be worried about how you look and yourself. You have to get your clients in a good shape. So they should be representative of how good you are.
Yeah, I guess also though, if I'm a working guy, I got a really busy day. Like, my trainer can be busy and get fit too if I'm supposed to do it.
No, totally. And I'm not saying a trainer shouldn't be fit. They should be fit. But to what extent, right? So yeah. There's not a relationship where the most fit trainer knows the most. That's all I'm saying.
I certainly get that. The coach and that's sort of like the coach is a different thing than the player, right? And they need a different set of skills to be successful as the coach than as the player. I'm sort of thinking of the player and the coach at the same thing, right? Like the Wayne Gretzky kind of thing, player coach.
Yeah. Look at Michael Jordan, who has not been successful as an owner as far as winning championships. Mike Singletary, one of the greatest linebackers of all time, was the coach for the San Francisco 49ers, failed miserably with that same squad. Jim Harbaugh came in after him and got to the Super Bowl.
There's far more examples of good players being bad coaches than them being good coach, great player, great coach. Like those examples are not that common. Okay, so you deal with two groups of people, individuals who are unfit and people who are maybe not that successful. What do you think most people are getting wrong about both of those two things, making money and being fit and healthy?
Being fit and healthy, probably both, honestly, is like what we talked about earlier on. This comes full circle, is the journey. They're always trying for the shortcut. Right? What's the shortcut I can do? I have a really good friend who loses 60 pounds every year.
Every year?
Every year he loses 60 pounds. He weighs high 200s, and during Lent, he goes on this hardcore diet, and he loses 60 pounds. He works out every day. He cuts out all carbs, eats very healthy, and that's it. And then he goes back to his normal diet for the rest of the year after Lent. And people want to go 0 to 60. They want a shortcut. They want to do something that they believe is quick and it's going to fix all their problems. That's just not how it works in business or with your body, right? There's so many crossovers between health and wealth. And the one major one is it takes a while. It's trial and error. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to grow slow. And you shouldn't try to outthink the room. You just have to do the right things over and over to be successful. To get healthy and to get fit, you got to be consistent over time. To be successful in business, you got to work every day. You got to have to put years into it. Yeah, at some point you're going to hit a plateau in both the health and in the wealth world, right? And you're like, well, what do I do? Well, then you reach out to an expert. Sometimes in business you go, hey, I need another business partner, or I need to reach out to someone who's been there and done that in the industry who can maybe help me along. But don't try to use the shortcuts. Understand that you're going to have to just ride this out and learn lessons in the journey.
Yeah, people got really excited about goals. People are still really excited about goals. Goals are super important, but I actually heard it said by Scott Adams that systems are far more important than goals. I think that's kind of what you're hitting on. Like, if you're wanting to get fit for like the beach this summer, that's great. That's a goal, but that is not going to reach you to 65 years old, healthy, mobile, able, understands how to eat, things like that. That's going to take a system of managing your body. So yeah, you can get, really lean for 3 months, but then if you just like give up like your buddy, he doesn't have a system. Maybe he does have a system once a year. He loses all that weight. That's kind of his system. But it's not going to take him for a long period of time to the finish line. Same thing is true in business where you can be like, I want to sell whatever, $20,000 this month. You can go hard, 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 hard. But that was not a system. That's a goal. Now, if you put a sales system in place that it's like every week we make 30 sales calls. Okay, now you have a system. Now you have something that you can actually look at the outputs and then tweak the inputs. Okay, 30 is not enough. We need to do 35 calls. Okay, I can just turn that dial a little bit up. One of our core values here is predictability, because if you have an unpredictable business, you have no way of saying, okay, I know what this lever is set at right now. It's set at 5. To get our result that we need to crank it to 6, or we need to crank it to 7, or we need to crank it to 8. If you got levers spinning in all different directions, like a plane that's going down, how can you ever know what input is going to work? It's like a science experiment, right? You need to have a set controlled amount of variables. If you have so many variables, you don't know what's working and what's not. How can you ever predict what your outputs are going to be at the end?
You've probably seen this a lot more than I have, but looking at some business owners in different businesses, not necessarily in fitness, they're always running around like a chicken with their head cut off. They're always doing a million things, and it seems like there's never. They're almost looking for this aha moment wherein it's all going to come together and life is going to be easier and the systems are going to be there, but they take on something else, and then there's another problem, and they take on something else, and it's just a series of putting out small fires. So, I mean, I wonder on your end, like, how do you avoid just putting out small fires all day?
Well, this is a really difficult one in business because everyone wants you to look super busy at all times. We work and live in a culture where being busy looks like working hard, whereas being productive is not necessarily prioritized. So if somebody walks past your desk, they need to see you like on your email or doing something or this or that. Like they don't want to see you like sitting at your desk reading a book. That's like going to get you fired in some places. Like there was actually it was kind of a funny story. And Steve, you can pull this up. There was this guy, he was working for a campaign that ended up not doing very well, but they had like a 10,000 piece puzzle or something. Just search like giant puzzle campaign manager. This campaign manager was like working on this puzzle like 2 days before the primary or something. And he just got roasted. Like people were just destroying him. Like, this guy's not working. He's not, yeah. It was DeSantis' campaign. Staff turn on Scott Wagner for spending time doing puzzle after Florida governor came a distant second place behind Trump in Iowa polls. And look, I'm not saying that this guy is a good leader. Like there is a certain time to do this and there's a time not to do it. But if we're sending the message that this guy can't take like a couple of minutes out of his day to take like a small mental health break, he has to be like grind. We just had a guy on who he's an expert in rest. Alex Pang is his name. He's an expert in rest, and he goes through the science. Like you become far more productive as a person when you can take a break. So to stop yourself from putting out small fires constantly, I would say, one, you have to actually have time to go, okay, we're putting this fire out Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Monday, Tuesday, Friday, over and over and over again. Let's slow down. Let's go back and let's fix this system. Let's like fix it right now and actually put ourselves in a position that it won't necessarily occur in the future. And for the sake of looking busy, you're like, I can't fix this right now, and then we kick the can down the road over and over and over again. And instead of going to the root problem, which is usually hard and takes a lot of brain power, we're just like, I'm just going to do it myself right now. I see that from so many entrepreneurs. It's going to take me more time to teach you how to do it than to just do it myself. So I'm going to do it myself. And it's like, yes, right now it will, but you're never going to scale this business because you feel like you have to do everything. And you're so preoccupied with going fast right now that you don't ever think about what it's going to look like in the future. So that would be one of my key things to stop yourself from putting out fires is like slow down a little bit. I have these series of posters in my office. Naval Ravikant says you should be too busy to, quote, do coffee while still keeping an uncluttered schedule. I don't need a meeting every 15 minutes. Sometimes I need a little bit of time. But again, when you're in a corporate situation, maybe it's hard to have other people understand, like, I need some time in my day to just actually slow down and think about the problems that are in front of us and not just go, 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 go.
Yeah. And I think that's well said. And I think the problems that entrepreneurs have aren't the problems that corporate America always has. There's sometimes different problems, right? Because they're not dealing with the amount of things you are, and you're your own boss for the most part, right? So it's not, you're not dealing with the same thing that someone with a boss is dealing with. So,
but still, my employees want to see me working.
Oh, true.
My employees don't. This is one of the things that I tell people: if you want to get staff or anyone, if you're a leader at any level, and you want to have people quickly be upset with you, there's 2 quick things you can do. 1, lack of consistency in applying the rules. 2, lack of transparency and ability in decision making. So if 1, my lack of consistency in applying the rules, if I'm allowed to read a book, but you're not allowed to read a book, people are going to be very upset with that very quickly. It's like, if I'm allowed to park in that parking space, but you're not, it's like, well, wait a minute, why not? You're special? I'm not special? Like, what gives here? So people want to see, if I'm going to enforce that rule, and there's like a culture within our office that, hey, you can't be reading a book, we're not productive here when we're doing that, then it'd be difficult for me to do it. And not to say that our company isn't receptive to that, but I think that's still embedded in everyone. They're like, this is not productive if he's reading. Hard to get around.
Yeah. I mean, that transparency is so important, and it's not everywhere. It's mostly nowhere. That's a big part of the problem. So I majored in public relations, which is maintaining and creating relations between an organization and its constituents through strategic two-way communication. I'll never forget that definition. But basically, that's just a fancy way of saying being honest, being open, and making sure that there's good communication channels between an organization and its people. And that helped me in my fitness career, certainly. Just being totally open with my clients about everything. They tell me they have a goal. Hey, this goal's too lofty. You're not going to be able to do this properly. But it also helped me from the marketing side, because I knew I needed to appear, I'm not saying that I wasn't, but I needed to appear that I was professional and known, and that I did a good job. So initially, we didn't talk about this, but when I started that website, because I had that PR background, I was able to get into some outlets and some magazines, Men's Health and all these other, whatever. And it's just, it's way easier than you think. It's really easy to do once you know the game.
Usually you have to pay to be featured in a lot of these things.
Well, this is no money, just effort. So there's 2 ways to go about it. One is Harrow, help a reporter out. And basically, these reporters are looking for inquiries to write articles. So they might say, hey, I'm a reporter for a big publication that writes out of Miami. A lot of times they don't tell you who they are. I'm looking to write a story on logistics supervisors. If you know one, and you know someone who has a popular logistics company who does a good job, let me know. And then you reach out to them. They have their email, and you just whatever. They have a billion different categories you can reach out. They're looking for stories. Journalists are looking for stories. So that's one way you can go about it. The other way is just to look at particular magazines, or find something like a paper, I don't know, with the Columbus Dispatch or something, right?
Yep.
And they're most likely going to have, let's say, like a traveling editor. You find the traveling editor, and you see like what they're covering in each month. They'll send you like a calendar of what they're covering. So they might say, oh, well, in March we're covering cruise ships. Well, if one of your clients is a cruise ship, it's a perfect time to pitch the traveling editor. For someone like you or me, we would look for maybe like a business editor. Oh, I'm looking to cover small businesses in Columbus that have, expanded. Okay, great. I'm gonna write up something for you. I'm gonna pitch you my idea on what you can cover. They're looking for stories, and a lot of people don't know this, but that's what media relations is in PR. So basically, you're flipping through a magazine, doesn't matter what. Let's call it Travel and Leisure, and you're reading about some new fancy hotel that's in the Bahamas. You're like, oh, I want to go there. That looks great. And there's a guy, and he's writing about this. it's almost an advertisement, because what they most likely did is that hotel's media relation team sent this reporter free to go to this hotel, put them up. Maybe they said, hey, you have to pay for your food, but we're going to pay for everything else. You're going to come here and,
Document your experience.
well, it's said, but it's not said, right? So you're not allowed to actually say you have to write about us. We hope that you write about us afterwards. And if you don't write about us afterwards, you and anyone else who works in your media relations office will never be invited back.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How big of a benefit do you think that is now? Being like, I didn't see that you advertise like, oh, I've been featured in Men's Health or things like that. You think it's a pretty big feather in your cap?
To some people, it's huge, and to other people, they know the game. They know, like, featured in or something. It's not like they did a feature article on me. Usually, they just took a quote from me. I'm like, oh, you're writing about this particular kind of movement, deadlifts. I'm a certified personal trainer. Let me tell you what most people get wrong in the deadlift. And then they just quote me on that one thing. So yeah, I'm in Men's Health, but it's not like the article is featuring Steve Washuta and his book. They're just taking a quote. So.
That's hire a reporter.
Yeah.
Or help a reporter out.
Help a reporter out. Yeah.
Interesting. So you did do a book. You obviously said the impetus for that was to help people out. What was the writing and publishing process like for you? And how have you seen that impact your business, if any?
I reached out to 2 publishers, and I didn't want to abide by their sort of criteria. So I just ended up self-publishing.
Yeah.
It just wasn't worth it. I'm like, no, I don't want to have the deadlines that you're setting for me. I don't want to go through all this. I'm not taking this out. So no, we're not going about this. So I just self-published, which is way easier to do, but then there's no upfront money. Then you're only making money on the percentages of the books you sell, when most times publishers will pay you an upfront fee for writing the book. I had inguinal hernia surgery, and which is not very serious at all.
Bad one myself.
Okay, yeah, so you know the deal.
Soccer player, they said it was very common for soccer players.
Yeah.
It's a hip intense sport.
Hip intense, wear and tear over time. I did Muay Thai for a long time, just a lot of kicking. So during that time, I couldn't really personal train. And I started writing the book then, and then maybe it took a few more weeks after that, but I think I wrapped the whole book up in like 6 weeks. And I just needed to do something while I was there. But also at that time in my career, I was doing a lot of the interviews for my gym. So I would see trainers who came in, and I saw what they were learning and what they expected and what they didn't know, and thought, I wish I could just put all of this down on paper and pass this along, because these kids just don't, they're not seeing the picture.
So written form lives on, kind of that evergreen content that you talked about, and it can earn a little bit of money while you're potentially sleeping.
Sure. And credibility. To be honest, there's not a lot of people in the fitness industry who are writing books, so it helps with some credibility.
So do you actually have a physical book, or is it all Kindle?
Yeah, physical book.
Do you print them, or will Amazon print them for you on demand?
Amazon prints them and sends them out. I also have, I recorded the audio, so the audio book is out as well.
There you go. Yeah. Heck yeah. What's the title of that book for anybody listening?
Fitness Business 101. And then the byline is what the certifications don't teach you. You can find that on Amazon. And again, Amazon doesn't use, I forget who they use. I guess they use Audible.
Yep.
For their.
Yep.
Yeah.
Would you do it again? Would you write another book?
I would. Yeah. It would be much different this time. I wouldn't write it, I think, about business. It'd be I wouldn't use that title. It'd be much more about being, again, introspective about your skill sets, because I think that's important. I think so many people now career transition. That's what I would write it about. When you career transition, what's important? What should you look for? How do you start? People always want to follow their passion. That's great, but sometimes it's not going to do it. Your passion's not going to make you money.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that people are passionate about that don't really have the ability to make a living out of. So there you go. Fitness Business 101.
Did you career transition?
No, man. I started this business maybe 4 months after I graduated from college. So I started this business. I graduated in 2014. I guess what would have been spring of 2014. Started this business in September of 2014. So it was probably 4 to 5 months after I graduated from college. I had a degree in entrepreneurship. So I knew I would be an entrepreneur, or at least I suspected I would be an entrepreneur in some ways. I mean, my friends were getting accounting degrees, they were going to become accountants. Some an education degree, they were going to become teachers. I had a entrepreneurial studies degree, so I figured that's what I would do. I just didn't quite know what. We sort of stumbled into this business. I thought I was going to move to Nashville, Tennessee, and go into the music industry. Naive 21, 22-year-old. I thought I'll set this business up and then I'll move and, I'll run this remote and then I'll go get a job down there. And
what do you mean in the music industry? Like representing musicians?
Yeah. So my original business, I started a live entertainment company while I was in college. We brought music acts to my small little town. We threw, what some people might call parties at this point in time, hosted at venues, not like a house party or anything, but we'd charge admission. And then the bar would keep what they sold, and we would get the door, essentially, which was actually pretty successful. We ended up kind of building out a little music festival that I ran my senior year, but really was a model that only worked in a small town. It wasn't something that's like, okay, let's go to Columbus or let's go to Nashville and do this. So
couldn't you just do it for all events? Can you be like, oh, comedians and anyone else, like anyone who does a live event?
Probably could have, but I sort of wanted to graduate at that point in time, and I thought Nashville was the place to do it. My business partner, who was a year older than me, he had already moved to Nashville. He had got a job at this small company called William Morris Endeavors, which if you know or don't know, they represent, half of the music industry. They own that portion of the UFC. There was rumors they were going to go public. They own professional bull riding. They're huge. They're enormous. He got a job there, and I'm like, okay, sweet. I'm going to move down there. I'm going to come and work with you. I got this message from my now business partner. He's like, hey, I'm thinking about starting a business. I know you ran a business in college. Maybe you can talk me through it, get some ideas on paper. We sat down, we had a couple of beers, and before we knew it, I'm like, yes, let's start this business. Let's go for it. Here we are 10 years later. I never moved to Nashville, but I thought naively, I'll be able to just get this thing going in 4 or 5 months. It'll be set up and it'll be able to be run, by my business partner on its own in Ohio here, and I can move. When you're naive, when you're 22 and you maybe outkicked your coverage of abilities. Well, Steve, a couple other, last parting questions here, because I know we're, wanting to be mindful of your time, and we've been super appreciative so far. So maybe just what do most people get incorrect about fitness? There's so many people who are overweight in the United States and unfit. What do you think is the primary driver of that? What are people not understanding, missing, and unable to do?
Well, firstly, it's starting at a young age. So I mentioned before, my wife is a pediatrician by trade, and they're taking PE classes out of schools now, right? You and I used to just go to gym class. Sometimes it's not even mandatory in some schools now. Kids are not outside as much. They're sitting inside. We played video games when we were young. It was a normal thing, but we also like to just go outside and ride our bikes and kick the soccer ball, right? That doesn't happen as much anymore. So the chances that you're going to stay out of shape and obese, if you are as a kid, are exponential. Yeah. So I'd say if you're a parent, it's getting your kids to be active at a very young age will keep them active. What we want are people who are kind of like lifelong, stop thinking about everything as like a professionalizing. You should just be like a lifelong exerciser. Just have fun with it, right? Don't worry if it has to be lifting. It could just be going out and playing soccer with your friends. And it's funny, I wonder if you see the same thing. When I go home for Thanksgiving, home to New Jersey where I'm from sometimes, and it's normal to meet up with your friends, and sometimes Thanksgiving we'll play a quick football game or something. None of my friends can play anymore. Right? Oh, yeah. I'm only 38, but they're all just no, I have this sprained ankle
for
and
a torn Achilles tendon or ACL.
And I'm like, well, it shouldn't be this way. The reason it is that way is because they stopped, right? You can't stop. You have to be a recreational athlete forever. Just keep moving around, keep doing things. Don't focus so much on the weight room. I know I'm the personal trainer. I should be telling you right now to go in and you would think bench press and squat and deadlift. No, I'm not. Movement is really key. Constant movement, and stop with the shortcuts. You're not going to find these specialized diets that get you to where you have to be. You're not going to find this one perfect workout. Also find something you enjoy to do, right? It should be a little bit of both, just like work, right? You have to do some things every day that suck at work. When you're just like, I don't want to do this, but I know I have to do it. And maybe if I get it out of the way, I'll enjoy the rest of my day. But there should be some things that you enjoy at work. This is the part of the day that I really like. Maybe it's the podcast or whatever, right? So I think people have to look at fitness that way too. It's like, well, what do you enjoy doing? You enjoy playing doubles tennis with your wife? Great. Do that 2 or 3 days a week. But then go to the gym and kick your own ass at least one day a week. Right? Make sure this is also somewhat difficult. Challenge yourself mentally and physically. Make sure this is also hard. It's not just fun. It needs to be a little bit of both so that you can continue to do it for the rest of your life. Because if it's only hard, you're going to stop. And if it's only easy, you're not going to progress. So it's got to be a little bit of give and a take. But I think that's an important part. But also I read this in my book, there are fundamental movement patterns that people are not moving in. The average person does this. They lay down, they go to sleep for 8 hours. They wake up, they sit at their little kitchen table, and they eat breakfast. Then they drive 30 minutes in their car, sitting down. They get to their office, they sit down in a chair for 6 to 8 hours. They get back in their car, sit down, drive 30 minutes. They go back to their kitchen table, eat dinner. They sit on the couch, watch 2 hours of Netflix, then they go back to sleep, right? So that person might have been standing for 30 minutes a day. So because of that, they're not moving in all the ranges of motion that our body needs, right? You want to move, sagittal and frontal, which means, sideways, and you want to be able to twist, transverse. You want to be able to lunge and squat and rotate, and your shoulders and hips are built like ball and socket, basically, right? They have to move in a circular fashion, and we're just sitting down, moving in one direction. So if nothing else, every day, move in all directions, get your body to move the right way, because joint health is also important, right? That's people end up getting surgeries, they end up getting joint replacements, and then because of that, they're immobile, and then they get sedentary, and then they get less healthy. So it's a vicious cycle. So you don't worry about what the people are doing on TikTok and Instagram. You don't have to bench 400 pounds. You don't have to have a six pack. You just have to consistently move, have long-term goals, right? Not all these short-term goals. You can have some short-term goals. It's fine, but you're going to fail, just to let you know. You're going to fail on most of your short-term goals. So have a long-term goal. Just like your financial advisor would tell you, hey, we need to retire with an X amount of money. And you might say, well, I also want that Lamborghini by the time I'm 42. Okay, if you miss it, no big deal. We're still on pace. We still saved in your 401k. We still did all the right things. And I think that's really what's important for the general public to understand.
I think you hit on something that I see so much from people. They will take fitness to such an extreme place that it's not sustainable for any period of time. Like, I got a friend who he's not like terrible shape. You wouldn't see him and be like, that guy's really fat, but he's very soft and doesn't have a ton of muscle tone. But whenever he wants to like get into fitness again, and it'll be in rare instances, he'll start training at like 5:30 a.m., like doing like crazy lifts, and he'll be like, I'm going every day. And I'm like, dude, just like go like 2 days a week. Like, and by the way, don't go at 5:30 a.m. because I know that you don't like to wake up early like that.
What's the business equivalent?
The business equivalent would be like, I'm going to make 500 sales calls a day. And it's like, there's no possible way that you're going to do this every single day. You're just not. Like, that'd be like, I'm going to wake up at 5:30 a.m. and start making sales calls. And it's like, no, you're not. You're not. Like, maybe you can 1 or 2 days, but then eventually you're going to burn out and be like, I can't do this. I hate this. You're going to start to slow down. You're going to go to 300 calls a day. Then you're going to go 200 calls a day. And then you're like, well, we just can't make calls right now. We have so much going on. And it's like, dude, if you made 3 sales calls a day or even 1 sales call a day, that's a totally attainable standard. If it's like, I want to walk 1 mile a day, that's totally attainable. That's like 20 minutes of walking, pretty easy to do. When you say, I'm going to spend an hour and a half in the gym at 5:30 a.m., I'm like, why are you lying to yourself? Like, you have not had this pattern up until now. You're 32 years old. You have never had this pattern up until now.
Yeah.
Now you're just going to snap your fingers and boom, I'm going to be a dog, dude. I'm going to be like Jocko. I'm going to be in there sweating at 5:30 a.m.
It's like, why not make that the long-term goal for both? For maybe it's like, hey, I want to eventually make 20 sales calls a day. Great. But right now you're making 0 sales calls a day. So let's start with 2. And then once you get 2 and maybe you're able to, secure 1 person every 2 weeks, then we could up it to 4, right? Like, focus on the quality of your sales call before the quantity of your sales call. And that's the same thing in fitness. It's like, hey, don't worry about getting there at 5:30 a.m. 7 days a week. Just get there at some point in the day, 2 days a week, and then we'll work towards that down the road.
Yeah, you said it. Let's not professionalize everything. Like, you don't need to be a professional tennis player. Like, you don't need to be the best tennis player. Just like, go out there and have fun. And to your point, we're very competitive as Americans. So like, if we pick something up, we're like, well, we want to be the best. Like, I start playing pickleball. It's like, oh, I want to get nationally ranked. It's like, dude, just like go out and move a little bit. Like, don't have to become the best. Honestly, if you can internally be like, I know I'm not good at this thing, and I actually don't really care that much if I get good, you're gonna have way more fun at that. Because if you like lose, you're like, I don't care. It's whatever. It's pickleball. It's not even like a real sport. Come on, man. But if you're like, I'm gonna get great, then it becomes like a job and a task, and you don't have fun with it anymore. And you do that for like 2 years, and then you're like, nah, I haven't played pickleball in a while. I just get like, it's too much. It's too much for me because you're like, I have to practice every night now. And I think you've really kind of hit it on the head.
Well, I think obligations are also an excuse for people.
Mm.
So people will start to have kids, or maybe they are working a little bit longer hours, or maybe they took on another business or whatever it is, and they go, well, I'm too busy. Like that's not something I can fit in. But it's like, well, you can't make that an excuse, because your health is going to make sure that you function better in all of these things.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And also, you can find 20 or 30 minutes. Everyone can find 20 or 30 minutes to do something a few days a week.
I 100% agree with you. I think that everyone will perform better in whatever tasks that they have going on if they can take a couple of minutes out of their day to prioritize their physical strength, health, well-being. I think it's also good for your mental health. I do not buy into this idea that I'm going to grind for 12 hours a day and I don't eat, I don't sleep. I don't train. I don't have time to train, dude. I got to grind. I do not buy into that you're going to be better than me doing that. I think I'm going to be better than you if I can sleep my 8 hours. I can train in the afternoon or evening, because that's when I personally like to train. I like to sleep. I don't want to get up at 6 and train. I did the day because we had to, but I don't like doing that, and I admit that to myself. And then I can be like a little bit like relaxed at the office. Take my walk in the middle of the day. I have a couple of minutes downtime. I think that I'm going to be way more productive than you if you're just grinding and be like, I don't care if I'm fat. I don't have time to train right now.
Well, you just said something
You're
very
crazy.
introspective that most people don't understand, is you have to analyze yourself and when you can get it in. And when, like, so I'll have clients who come up to me and say, hey, Steve, when's the best time to work out? I said, why? Well, I only have time in the morning. Okay, well, that's the best time to work out. If that's the only time you have, then that's what you have to do, right? You have to be introspective about yourself to some extent, but you also have to look at your schedule and see when you can work out, to see if it lines up with your schedule and who you are and what you can do and when you can fit it in. People are trying to find a way out of working out. That's what I noticed. They're trying to find a way out of it. And what I will say is, you probably see this, I'm sure, in fitness, but you probably see this somewhere in business, and I'd be interested to see where you can also see a parallel in business. But there's eventually this aha moment with fitness where it's not that I just like working out. I need to work out, right? Like, it's a part of my day. I absolutely need to do it, right? At some point, maybe not every day, but whatever, every other day. For the average person, that's not the case. Working out is miserable. They hate it, especially for the first week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. For everyone, it's different, right? We're all very, biodiverse and psychodiverse. I've had clients who love it after the first few sessions. I've had clients who it takes them 3 or 4 months to warm up to actual, really delving into fitness and being like, this is a part of my life. But there is, at some point, that's what I try to explain to the general population, that aha moment where you go, you know what? I actually kind of like this. Maybe it's just one thing. Maybe it's like, hey, I really like just pushing myself and doing endurance stuff on the treadmill. Maybe it's like, I really like lifting heavy weights. That's what I like to do. I don't like to do cardio, but I like heavy weights. You'll find your thing. Just stick with it and wait for that aha moment that gets you over the hill.
I like that. It's like a lot of things, you have to kind of learn to love it. It's going to take some time. It's like the first time you drank alcohol, you're like, oh, this is disgusting. Why does anyone do this? Same thing with coffee, Same thing if you've ever smoked a cigar or a cigarette. You're like, oh, this is disgusting. Why would anyone do this? It's like, well, they had the same reaction as you the first time they did it. They're like, this is bad. I don't like this. But eventually you're like, oh, yeah, this is something I really do enjoy to do. For me, I do not make my workouts optional. I make them mandatory. I don't listen to my body. I know that maybe you might have different opinion on this than some people. Some people are like, oh, I do like an intuitive, like working out. Like if I don't feel like it that day, I won't do it. And I'm like, dude, I will take any excuse not to work out if you allow me to. It's kind of the joke about the man who has a hole in his house. It's a bright sunny day and he says, well, there's no reason to patch it right now. It's actually nice to have this hole in my house because a little bit of sunlight comes through. Then it starts raining and he says, well, I can't go patch it now. It's going to be dangerous if I get up there. It's just like, you're going to twist anything to avoid the thing that you don't really want to do. So for me, it's like Monday I lift, Tuesday I lift, Wednesday is cardio, Thursday I lift, Friday is high speed cardio, Saturday I lift and I do cardio, Sunday is rest. If you want, you can do a little bit of cardio, but that's up to you. Those are not optional. And it's like, oh, you have something in the afternoon today. I had a podcast at 2:00. okay, you're either going to do it after. I know I don't want to do it at 8 o'clock, so I have to come in working out in the morning. It's just like you're just picking what time you do it. You don't pick if you do it.
Well, I mean, that's comes back to knowing yourself and saying where am I going to function best. I had clients who just hired me. They knew what they were doing, but they go, I back out, and if I pay you in advance, I'm going to have to come to you. And then other people, I would say, if you don't have that luxury, if you don't make enough money, you think to hire a personal trainer on a regular basis, find a friend or two to keep you accountable and book your workouts in advance so that they take time out of their day. Maybe they're busy also to say, hey, we're meeting every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 6 o'clock at this park to do this workout. And if you're not there, then I took time out of my day. You can find time in your day.
Yeah. Okay, we're building a gym in our new facility. I told you we're building a new facility. I've asked a couple people this, but what are your must-have pieces of equipment? We have about 1,500 square feet, so we got some space, and we got a decent little budget. What are the things that you're putting in that gym right away?
A cable machine of some sort. I don't think it has to be a cable machine where you have the two ends and they're long and it's rectangular. I think you can get a smaller circular cable machine. But yeah, I mean, you can do anything on a cable machine, right? I can pull, I can push, I can raise it up, I can put it down. I can do single handle. You can, obviously you can swap out handles. You can do 2 double handle exercises. So I would definitely say a cable machine would be the more expensive piece of equipment that I would buy.
But very functional, a lot of different things you can do.
Yeah, I mean, it's functional is a great word that I would use for a cable machine. Yeah. And then a TRX suspension trainer.
Okay. We have some rings right now. It's sort of similar.
Similar. I would say the rings are more difficult. So because they're more difficult, there ends up being a little bit less you can do with them. I think a TRX, again, is a little bit more functional with what you can do with it. I think those are 2 very important pieces for any smaller fitness facility.
That's it. Nothing else. No leg press, no leg extension.
I'm not big on the leg press, leg extension. Yeah, listen, they're great. They're great machines, but you can get a $10 gym membership and go use those machines. So if I was building a gym, I would be less apt to fill the space with sort of big, heavy machinery. I'm more of a toy gadget guy, right? I want a wall where I can slam balls off of and do really sort of active functional things. Kettlebells, maybe a place where I can push a sled.
Okay, so you want kettlebells.
A little bit of turf, some place where I can jump and do some sort of plyometrics where the ground is a little bit softer, the ground's not super hard.
Okay, so we're going to need boxes.
Boxes, and then the ground is very important in the gym. Whatever ground you're putting under there. Some people have like a dual ground, like they have one section that's a little bit more soft with turf, and they have another section that's maybe just your standard pads that you're dropping weights on.
I haven't quite decided the turf area versus definitely we'll have like the rubber gym flooring for a good portion of it.
Some sort of cardio equipment that you can really bust it on. So that's either like an assault bike.
We have an assault bike.
Or a rower, something.
Yeah, a rower.
Yeah. Well, then you're golden.
We have a ski erg too.
Yeah. I mean, those are I think musts if you're especially if you're under the age of, let's say, 55 and you could still like really push and get your heart rate up. You need those.
Okay. Any other pieces of equipment? You don't have any sort of chest press. You didn't even say we needed a bench press or a squat rack.
Dumbbells. As long as you have dumbbells, you're good to go, right? You could do every single exercise with a dumbbell. Me personally, that's what I'm saying. I wouldn't have. Yeah, of course I'd put a squat rack in, but I don't, because you could bench inside of a squat rack. You can do everything in a squat rack, but I wouldn't have a separate individual bench. I wouldn't have a leg press necessarily, or leg extension, because I do all my leg exercises with dumbbells.
Body weight,
right? So
you're using your body weight.
I'm using my body weight and dumbbells, right? So I can lunge with whatever, 50-pound dumbbells. You can front squat with 90-pound dumbbells. You can do the exercises with dumbbells. Now again, this is me just assuming if you're putting this gym inside of an office, you're going to have limited space and you're going to want to use more of that space for functional movement and moving around, and not just being walking around with like a machine, outstretched at every arm length.
It'll be a mix, I think. We got 1,500 square feet, so we'll have some space.
Oh, and I would say some sort of kicking bag. So not a boxing bag. Most people are confused by those. Boxing bags will swing. Kicking bags, like Muay Thai bags, should almost touch the ground so that when you hit it in the middle with your kick, the reverberation is going up and down rather than the bag swinging. Does that make sense? Sort of like physics. So if the bag's touching the ground and you pop it in the middle, it bends in the middle. So all of that pressure doesn't go back into your hip.
Mm.
But if the bag is swinging and you hit a 100-pound bag while that's swinging, well, then all that energy comes back into your hip.
Yeah, I saw you were kicking a bag that had like a weight attached to the bottom of it.
Yeah, so that doesn't move as much. And I wouldn't recommend anyone kick a bag like that. I've just been doing it for a long period of time. That's certainly an injury waiting to happen for most people.
A bag, that's a good one because then you can do cardio on your own essentially, and it has some function.
It has some function. You do cardio on your own. Most people like it, even if you're not going to use it on a regular basis. Just if you have a few bad sales calls or something goes wrong, a client leaves you, you can go in, put the gloves on, and get it out for the day.
I love it. Well, Steve, I appreciate you coming in, man. Tell everybody where they can find you, catch up with your stuff. If someone out there is a fitness coach and needs some help potentially, where they might be able to find your content, your programs, your book, things like.
Sure, I appreciate it. Yes, stevewashuta.com is also fitnessbusiness101.com. They lead to the same place.
Fitness Business 101. It's a good domain.
And all the links are there. And thanks for having me on. I appreciate, again, your professionalism here in your podcasting world. You're not a podcaster either, am I? We're professional interviewers.
I like both terms. Both terms sound pretty good to me. Well, thank you, Steve, man. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.